Hi folks, it is the one, the only, your favorite diplomacy YouTuber, Florida Man. I'm back to basics, and today I'm giving you my Basics of Germany, a video I'm titling Navigating 1901. Out of all the nations available as options to play in diplomacy, I think none offers such widely varied results as Germany. Germany is both one of those countries most likely to win the game, and one of those most likely to be eliminated or reduced to a single center. In other words, Germany has a lot in common with Austria. Unlike Austria, Germany is not surrounded by so many overly friendly neighbors who are bound and determined to ensure the power's early exit from the game. Nevertheless, Germany cannot count on any obvious firm allies either, and there is a real possibility that without deft negotiations, any and all neighbors may be hostile. That's why I call this video Navigating 1901 rather than Surviving 1901. There's no guarantee of survival. So here are my basic tips then on navigating 1901 as Germany. First things first. Communicate with both of your Western neighbors, and assess their intentions and whether or not you can work with them. Germany has almost no choice other than to pursue an early alliance with England or France. Any other option will typically lead to disappointment or a fairly early defeat. Yes, you could try to get Russia and Italy to join you in attacking the other Western powers, but without allying with England or France, that probably will not work to keep you alive, if France and England are allied against you. If they are allied against you, absolutely try that, but don't expect too much from it. I should note that I find France and Germany make a pretty ideal team, and I hold a much more favorable view of that combination than I do of England working with either of them. That said, if France gives you a bad feeling or doesn't quickly commit to working with you, or if England gives you a good feeling, you should strongly consider an alliance with England, because you really do need to be friends with one of these two powers. In the West, Belgium and the Channel are often a focal point of negotiations. If you can get England to violate a DMZ with France, or France to violate a DMZ with England, in the English Channel, that's usually tantamount to an open declaration of war, so I find that is one of the better ways to make sure you have an ally after 1901. In fact, at that point, you might even get to choose which one of them you work with, the aggressor or the one who's been aggressed upon. Belgium is a more subtle area. It's hard to demand Belgium for yourself, no matter which of the Western powers you are, because the other two will tend to reflexively oppose you and think you're greedy. At the same time, it's really good and useful to offer Belgium up as a bribe for someone to open the way you want them and become your ally. Since Belgium is basically an extra center, not a place that any one of the three Western powers is unusually likely to get, it's an extremely important bargaining chip. As for your opening moves, you might want to arrange a bounce with France in Burgundy, or you might want to move Munich to Ruhr if you trust France not to enter Burgundy, or not to move to Munich after entering Burgundy. That last one is kind of a difficult bridge to cross for a lot of people, understandably. I find I almost invariably want to move Kyle to Denmark unless you need the Kyle unit for something else, or you've already made a good deal with Russia. Even if you have made a good deal with Russia, taking Denmark in spring gives you negotiating leverage over him. If you have good relations with England and plan to partner with him, you might want to keep Russia out of Sweden by moving Denmark-Sweden to bounce him. If you have good relations with Austria and want to help Austria, you can threaten to bounce the Sweden move if Russia isn't nice to Austria. So you can see, if you don't move to Denmark in the spring, that's a lot of leverage you've given up. For these reasons, there are only three circumstances in which I would advise not moving to Denmark. 1. Where you and Russia agree that he'll open north and fight England, in which case you shouldn't be doing anything to annoy Russia. 2. Where you're pretty sure England isn't friendly toward you, in which case you might want to just guarantee Holland. Or 3. Where you're trying to make sure you have a decisive influence over who gets Belgium. Having a decisive influence over who gets Belgium can be valuable for the reasons I've already mentioned, and because whether that's the bargaining chip you're using to secure your alliance, or if it's something someone else has promised to you, it's always good to have more forces near something you want control over than anyone else does. And that's a good general rule in diplomacy, it doesn't just apply to Belgium. Something you may have noticed is I haven't included very many hard and fast rules about playing Germany, and that's also to do with the title of this video, Navigating 1901. The truth is, Germany has so much more uncertainty surrounding it than Russia. It's entirely possible that Germany does not survive 1901, and there's no strategy that guarantees that Germany is not quickly eliminated. Because there's no strategy that is the best strategy, I'm just trying to give you flexible recommendations. That said, here are my two favorite things to do as Germany. 1. Ally with France against England and get Russia to open north. By which I mean get Russia to move Moscow to St. Petersburg. If you can do this, England is almost guaranteed to fall apart quickly, especially because if he doesn't recognize what's going on, he might not get a single build in 1901. Russia could bounce him out of Norway, and you could pretend you were going to help him take Belgium, and actually bounce him out or support France in instead. If England has no builds in 1901, he's usually dead on arrival. The second thing I like to do is, if I'm allied with England instead, I can try to get Italy to attack France alongside both of us. If that happens, France finds himself quickly surrounded by enemy units, and even though it's more difficult to keep him from growing than it is to keep England from growing, France will almost always eventually succumb to this kind of attack, and it won't usually take very long either. The reason why I like these two different strategies of dogpiling on England and France respectively are because it's usually much more difficult to get England or France to switch sides if they can see that the alliance that they're with has overwhelming strength compared to the opponent. If France, Russia, and Germany are all attacking England, it's going to be a little bit harder for France to justify to himself going and fighting with England against you instead of going with the original alliance he made with you against England, because France already knows that England isn't going to be very useful as an ally because Russia is against him. And that is just a little bit of extra strength that you need to help solidify your alliance in these early seasons when your survival is on the line and nothing is certain. The only other possibility in the West, which I hadn't mentioned yet, is the Western Triple, in which you ally with both of your neighbors and attack Italy and Russia together. And this can be a powerful combination, I grant, but I generally don't think it's a good play for Germany because you typically wind up squeezed between France and England whenever England runs out of room to grow. The only reason to agree to a Western Triple early on, in my opinion, is if France and England are closer than you are to either of them, and then you only agree to it so you can stab one of them while their guard is down, or try to split them up and make them doubt each other. With that, I think I've finished discussing the West, so let me discuss your relations with the rest. Regarding Germany's relationship with Russia, I won't mince words. Russia is Germany's greatest geopolitical rival. That is true for significant periods of world history, and it's definitely true in diplomacy. The reason is that Russia and Germany are typically both very land-heavy powers in the same regions of the map. They can both exert a lot of influence on Central and Eastern Europe, and there's really only room for one. If Russia is growing quickly, that is a direct threat to German security. So Russia is just a major problem, and he will have to be dealt with down the line no matter what. Whether that means clipping his wings a bit or eliminating him entirely is dependent on your individual circumstances. What I can say definitively is there is no example of a successful Germany walking hand in hand with a successful Russia. It just doesn't happen, and I might go so far as to say it's actually impossible. Yes, Germany and Russia could attack Austria together, but if that happens early in the game, it just eliminates a Russian rival and enables Russia to more safely invade Germany. If it happens in the mid-game, it's very likely that Russia will still be the one to benefit most from it, because Germany's ally for the early game, whether it was France or England, can stab Germany while Germany is either embroiled in Austria or fending off a possible Russian stab. It might work in the late game, but only if Germany has already eliminated or substantially diminished both France and England, and if Germany has already done that and it's the late game, it's highly unlikely that Russia and Austria are both still strong powers. And if they are, they're probably gearing up for a joint attack on Germany. Similarly, I don't recommend Germany allying against England with Russia. Or rather, if Germany does do this, if Germany does this sea lion maneuver, I recommend that Germany only let Russia have Scandinavia. If Russia actually gets a foothold in the actual English island, that's a really big problem, because now Russia has units sort of all around Germany. Russia's got a unit in England, which is to Germany's west. Russia has units in Scandinavia to Germany's north, and Russia certainly has units in the east. And that's just a problem. Having enemy units all around you is just a problem waiting to happen. There's no getting around this. Russia is a problem for Germany. And if you can get rid of Russia, as soon as you're able to do so, I recommend doing it. On the subject of Austria, the relationship between Germany and Austria is also very important to Austria. It can be valuable to Germany, sure, but the conditions for that are very specific in my opinion. Ideally, you would just want Austria to function as a wall, or a very big speed bump, preventing rapid Russian growth. That is his function in German strategy. If Austria grows too much, he's just as much of a problem as Russia. You might want to force Russia to hold back a little bit in fighting Austria, or you might want to intervene in a Russian-Austrian fight to keep Austria alive for a little bit longer, but you don't want an Austria that's really strong unless you're extremely confident of his loyalty. And when I say confident of someone's loyalty, that should raise red flags for you because this is diplomacy, and I would only very rarely be confident of anyone's loyalty. However, you probably shouldn't let him get eliminated early on because again, that feeds into your Russia problem. As for Italy, I don't think there's that much to say. You can work together against France in the early game, or against Austria or Russia in the middle or later game, but in 1901, unless you're trying to fight France, all you need to say to Italy is, please keep out of Tyrolia, and I'll do the same. Turkey's relations with Germany are even less relevant to your early game, because he really can't help you early on, although I do like to encourage Turkey to work with Austria against Russia. But you know, Germany has no leverage in these discussions. So again, there's really not that much to say, just be friendly, and maybe we can deal with Turkey again later on if Germany is still alive at that point. So now you've got my complete tips on navigating 1901 as Germany. I hope I didn't leave anything important out. I'm sure people in the comments will tell me, and I hope you liked this and found it helpful. And if so, I hope you will like and subscribe and comment, give me video ideas, check out my other videos, share, all that good stuff. Until next time, Florida Man out.